Ba-da-ba-ba, ba-da-ba-ba. All right. Promoter 101. 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 Promoter 101.
Hi there, this is Jody Goodman from Live Nation San Francisco, Northern California, and I am on Promoter 101 with Steiny in the house.
Welcome, one and all, to the Promoter 101 podcast. This is our 199th meeting of our tribe. Please welcome Luke Pierce.
Thank you, Dan. Today, very excited to be joined on this podcast by the iconic Hollywood Bowl and Southern California concert promoter, as well as talent manager to many stars. Bill Silva here on the podcast later. Dan sat down with him in his home in the Hollywood Hills for a very special interview. Dan has a very long and storied relationship with Bill. He's one of his closest mentors from the last 30 years in music.
And a very special war story with FPC's Scott Leslie right here on Promoter 101.
I love it, Dan. Episode 199 of Promoter 101 starts right now.
We are thrilled to announce that Promoter 101 has teamed up with the Recording Academy's Music Cares Foundation to do a little good. And you, our beloved listeners, can help. By going to promoter101.net and clicking the merch tab at the top of the page, you can pick up a stylish, limited edition Promoter 101 Call Ya Mother t-shirt or hoodie in a huge variety of styles and colors. 100% of proceeds goes directly to Music Cares and their mission to provide a safety net of critical assistance for music people in their time of need. Shipping and handling is absolutely free, and for the first $10,000 we raise, our good friends at Prism are matching donations dollar for dollar. Go to promoter101.net right now, click on the merch tab, pick out one of our awesome shirts, and be the heart and soul of the music community by donating to Music Cares. And don't forget to call your mother.
Have you missed any of the past podcasts? Well, guess what? We saved them for you. They're all online, nicely cataloged, and available at promoter101.net. What do you think we should have everybody listen to? Maybe episode 123?
I think 123 is a good one, Dan. You know why? It's in my adopted home city of Philadelphia. We sat down, president of Philadelphia Live Nation's Jeff Gordon, for a live recording from the University Arts right on Broad Street, downtown Philadelphia. It was one of the coldest nights of the year, but it's a great podcast. Nonetheless, we talk about a lot of things from Kanye and Jay-Z and Watch the Throne to Made in America to everything going on in AC that Jeff is working on. It's a great interview. You should go back and check it out.
Yeah, the genius of this podcast being live was the war story happened in real time, and it was a fun thing. And the war story was from Feda's Eva Alexandria Rio, and it was really cool to have that story in front of the students in real time. What else happened that day, Luke?
We were joined by Point Entertainment's Jesse Lundy, who gave us a breakdown of the Philadelphia touring market. It was quite the dissection of the business, and for those of you touring the Northeast, it's one of the places you're going to have to play. So check it out. Go back, listen to episode 123 of Promoter 101 at promoter101.net.
We also did a Q&A at the end with the audience, and the students had some great questions for Jeff, as they're all local Philly residents that know the market and know what he does. So that was one of the better Q&A sessions that I'd actually seen in recent years. I was really excited about the interaction with Jeff and the audience.
It was indeed good, Dan. I was joined by a few of my friends that were in from Philly who are not in the music business. It was cool to share that with them as well, too.
If you got a free moment, drop us a review, subscribe, tell some friends about the podcast. They can make it just in time for one of those last episodes like this one. Just tell us, friend. Please do that for us. We're begging. We're begging.
Do it.
Jason Zink, Emporium presents, and I'm on Promoter 101.
News of the week.
It's time for News of the Week. This week, the Promoter 101 podcast went out with a bang as we recorded our very last session ever, live at IEBA, with AEG Presents SVP of Global Touring, Deborah Rathwell. With so many friends in attendance, we had a wonderful time, and that interview will be airing on November 7th, so be on the lookout for that. For all other news this week, we recommend you head on over to Polestar and check out their most recent issue. In particular, this week's cover story, which tells the tale of two strapping young lads who had a simple yet powerful dream: to create the world's most badass music business podcast. Did they succeed? You're goddamn right they did. That'll do it for News of the Week.
Greg Perloff, Another Planet Entertainment. I'm on Promoter 101.
Joining us next, we have one of my favorite promoters from Madison, Wisconsin, FCP Live, Scott Leslie here with a war story.
We're hanging out with Scott Leslie, a.k.a. Promoter from Agent versus Promoter.
Ah, the alter ego.
So you guys kept that a secret for a very long time. It was like the best kept secret.
It still would have been a secret if Joe knew how to use Instagram, right?
Were there any close calls before the word got out where it's like you almost got outed or something?
No, I wouldn't say there were any almost got outed, but there were definite moments where it was being talked about directly in front of me, and I was nervous that I was going to give a tell, but apparently I didn't. Sonia Grover came up to me at a Polestar a couple years after it started, and she goes, I know it's you. Just don't even pretend like it's not. She goes, I get your sense of humor. And she just came up to me so brazenly about it that I couldn't hide it. So she knew from a couple of years in, but it was a pretty closely guarded secret.
I remember a Polestar lobby hang in Nashville, or bar hang, where you had brought it up to me, like, who do you think it is? And I was like, the balls on this guy. When it came out and I found out it was you, I was like, motherfucker.
Well, you had talked about it with me like a couple of other times, so I had to have a little bit of fun with it, right?
That was hilarious. It's got to be this guy, or it got to be that guy, or one of these guys. Like, what a way to throw somebody off the fucking trail, man.
It was fun. It's certainly a little bit different now that they know who to call if they've been offended by it. But, now I get a bunch of agents and saying, don't meme me over this. Don't put me on Agent versus Promoter. And that's usually their way of saying, I'm going to do something to piss you off, but please don't put this on Agent versus Promoter. But no, it's still fun to do. And if Joe just knew how to use Instagram right, everything would still be the same.
I don't know that the industry's ever had more fun with anything like that on social media. You guys have game changed the industry and how much fun it can be with that. It's just so much fun.
I mean, we promote concerts for a living, or book concerts for a living, or you represent artists. It's at its core, we help people have a good time. Like, an agent books a tour and that band is somebody's favorite band. That's going to be the best night of their year in every single city in the country that they play. And there's a promoter on the other side of that was responsible for booking that. So all in all, our lives aren't bad. So sometimes you just need to not take things so seriously. And I think that if we did anything, it was to prove to people that we could still have fun and laugh.
Yeah, and I love that you guys keep it going. How often do you still put one of your own up?
Pretty often. We had the email address or whatever it is on the Tumblr to do a submission. And I got one like right off within 2 weeks of that being out there that just said, promoter, fuck agents, literally fuck every single agent. And I was, well, that's not very funny. It's not very creative. There's not a lot there. So people now more often than not will email me if they think they've got something.
Yeah, I get every once in a while somebody will send me a Promoter 101 post where it's just like, just so mean. It's just like, dude, and a particular person, it's just like, dude, maybe tone it down just a little bit. Right. This is more of a hate crime on this person than it is like funny.
Right. I don't need to have a forwarded email about, can you believe that this shit happened? Look at what this asshole did to me. And you should put this on Agent versus Promoter. Like, that's not been my experience with these people. So no,
it's like, I'm going to destroy this guy on my platform just because you had a bad day with him.
Yeah, I'm not doing that.
Not really the humor that the platform was invented for, I gather.
No, it was meant to make fun of ourselves. It wasn't meant to put people on blast unless we could make fun of them while doing that.
And everybody wins then.
Correct.
If you can't laugh at yourself, how much fun are you really having?
I mean, that was the key to everything. It was seeing the interactions and seeing people respond to it and knowing that we had sort of come across something that everybody was able to relate to. Usually the marketing ones are the ones that get the biggest response.
I love it. Well, I want to thank you personally for the amount of enjoyment I've gotten out of that. It's just amazing.
Well, awesome. Hopefully we'll keep it going.
Love having Scott Leslie here join us on Promoter 101. What a mensch.
This is Gary Tovar, founder of Golden Voice on Promoter 101.
Promoter 101 Flashbacks.
Episode 23.
John Giddings.
I worry about that because sadly we've lost a lot of people in the last couple of years. Leonard Cohen, David Bowie, Prince. And it's like, who are the new ones who are going to take the crown? And I don't honestly know that answer.
So there is a lot more shows playing stadiums than there ever have been before.
Yeah, well, shows are getting bigger. But it's become a normal thing to play a stadium as opposed to when I was growing up. Well, when I was growing up, it was abnormal to go to a festival. It was a left field thing to do. When we started the Isle of Wight, there were 400 festivals. Now there's 1,500 in the UK alone. So it's a rite of passage for a young person to go to a festival now. And going to a stadium, people don't see it as a hardship anymore. They think it's a normal thing to do. After Live Aid, stadium touring became normal.
So I think a lot of the kids in the US would think that that festivals are an American thing, and I think Paul Tollett would be the first person to credit that came out of Europe.
Yeah, I mean, I think America was 20 years behind us on the festival scene. You know, Rock Werchter, Rock at the Ring, Pink Pop, they existed long before Lollapalooza, and now they're catching up very, very quickly. And with their dance festivals as well.
Hey, this is Michael McDonald with Mick Management, and you are on Promoter 101.
Tweets of the week.
Hey, it's Thursday, so it's time for some tweets of the week. Ready, set, go. When you notice a show reported that is clearly not asked to be reported, but the venue took that upon themselves.
This is never a fun phone call to get from the agent or the manager. Never.
When you're told you are the first to be pitched and then learn everyone else already has offers in.
Turns out the agents lie sometimes, Luke.
Oh, wow. When a label holds a large block of tickets for a sold-out show and then releases them all at 4:05 on day of show.
Yeah, this happens way too often.
When an act wants to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the release of their worst album.
This one speaks for itself, I think.
That'll just about do it for Promoter 101 Tweets of the Week. Make sure you keep up with Dan on Twitter. He's at The Jew.
This is Emma Banks. I work at Creative Artists Agency, and this is Promoter 101.
Established in 2016, Promoter 101 and its illustrious founding fathers, Sir Daniel Steinberg and the one and only W. Lucas Pierce, have fermented like the finest of wines. And after almost 3 years of bringing you only the most exquisite, educational, and thought-provoking interviews, it is with great pleasure that we bestow unto you the Promoter 101 Masterclass Sessions.
Masterclass.
Dan, I'm very excited about our featured interview this week because this guy, not only just being an icon of the business and managing some of the biggest names, one of the most storied careers from work with Jason Mraz to 182 to Linkin Park, he's also a concert promoter and one of the largest ones in Southern California, responsible for booking the iconic Hollywood Bowl. And beyond all that, Dan, he is one of your closest mentors, so I'm excited to see you sit down finally with Bill Silva.
Hanging out with Bill Silva. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Dan. Welcome to the house.
I'm really excited about this.
Well, I've known you for quite a while. I've watched you coming up over the years, and Promoter 101's been a great chapter for you.
I've had a lot of fun with it, and I feel it's nice and fitting that we're wrapping up with you in the last couple episodes, so this is a very cool thing.
Cool. Well, thanks for asking.
So let's do a little history, and then we'll get into the cool stuff like the bowl and on the back end.
How historical?
Well, let's start in San Diego with college, because that really seemed where the live stuff kind of verged for you, right?
So grew up in the Bay Area. My dad was a scientist. He was in the middle of Silicon Valley making chips, manufacturing synthetic crystals that became wafers that became chips. Their first client was Atari.
Oh, wow.
My mom was a nurse. They met at USF. My dad's roommate was a guy named Bill Russell, who went on to become a famous basketball player. But my mom's family was originally from San Diego. My dad's side was all Portuguese. He was an only child. My mom's side was all Irish. She was an only child. It was obvious why she was when I met the family. There's a lot of Irish alcoholics in the family. I don't think they could get past one kid. So anyway, so San Diego was always attractive to me because I had family down there. When I chose to go to school, the big oil spill in Santa Barbara had just happened. And when I went to go check that school out, I got tar on my feet when I went to the beach. And I didn't get tar on my, literally. Yeah. And,
wow.
And when I went to San Diego, which had a beach that was basically as close, I didn't get tar on my feet. And I went, okay, this is where I'll go to school. And I went down there not realizing like an idiot. Here I am, 4.0 valedictorian, student body president, brightest guy from this great high school in the Bay Area, prep school. I hadn't paid enough attention to what the school actually did. So here I go to UC San Diego, which is one of the great science schools in the United States. And I want to be a business major. They don't even have a business department. So they're like, all right, idiot. Well, what's your second choice? I don't know. We have this thing called communications. All right, that sounds good. Let's do communications. Can I go to the beach? Yes. Okay, great. So anyway, I get to San Diego. And of course, people who listen to your podcast by now would know that UC San Diego has actually turned out a lot of very qualified music industry executives. Mark Geiger,
yeah.
Larry Weintraub, Scott Mantell, Mike Hayes, and I'm missing a bunch of others. But for whatever reason, a lot of the music people have come out of UC San Diego. Maybe it's just the proximity to LA.
Larry Weintraub told a story about being on the concert board while he was there and his first run-ins with you.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
How was that story?
It was him using college money and competing with an independent promoter to take bands, and how that interaction was not necessarily the best first interaction. That you guys became great friends later when he learned to understand that building acts meant something.
Well, it's funny because I had a similar experience, not with Larry, but I had a similar experience with the independent promoters when I started doing the college stuff on campus too. And the independent promoters in San Diego at that time were Mark Berman, who was partners with Avalon Attractions, which was Brian Murphy. There were some other independent promoters too, and a guy named Tony Campman, who was sort of the jazz guy. I was running in a lot of lanes as a college promoter and making a lot of people unhappy.
You and Brian had a lot of back and forth historically. I know we're jumping ahead a little bit, but you guys wound up competing hard for San Diego when he was the big promoter in LA.
Yeah, totally. And what I would tell you is one of the great gifts in my career was having Brian Murphy as a competitor, because Brian was great. Brian was really one of the great promoters. Agents loved working with him. His attention to detail was immaculate. He valued marketing. He valued getting to the audience. He valued good production. And I realized if I wanted to compete and win against a guy like that, I needed to up my game. Yeah. And honestly, I don't know if I hadn't had that as an example across the aisle, if I would have cared as much about stepping up the game the way that hopefully I've done over the years.
And you had worked with him at one point too, right?
We tried for about 6 months to work together, and it just wasn't the right time for both of us. I think it was a good learning experience. I think, I've had a lot of partnerships over the years. The one that was probably the most meaningful was the one with Barry Fay and Fayline for a couple of years. And again, this goes back to college, funny enough to bounce back. I was in college same time as a guy named Phil LaBelle was finishing up at Boulder, Tracy Gershon in Santa Barbara, and Peter Afterman, huge music supervisors over the years. Whenever you see the Rolling Stones involved in a film, Peter's involved in it. But he's also just a well-renowned music supervisor in the film industry. And we were all, sort of graduating around the same time or within a year or two of each other, and really got to know each other in the college years through different conferences that we'd attend and whatnot. And when Phil left CU in Boulder, which, by the way, was the only college in the country I knew that was doing stadium shows. And they were doing like 4 and 5 stadium shows every summer with Fayline.
It's awesome.
Yeah. And I was just fascinated by it. But anyway, Phil went in to go work with Barry and somehow said, oh, yeah, you want to do this thing in San Diego? I know this guy down there. He's a friend of mine. You should talk to him. So here I am a year into promoting. I get a call from Barry Fay who says, you want to do the Who at Jack Murphy Stadium with me? And I go, well, fuck yeah. What do I have to do? He said, can you figure out how to put the tickets on sale? And, blah, blah, blah. So here I am at 20.
Stadium show the first year.
21, 22 years old. Yeah. 1982. We put on the first stadium show in my career. And I don't say it to shame the young people that come to work for me, but, when they're kvetching about something, I don't mind trotting it out as well, what did you do when you were 22?
So did Barry play bank on a show that big, or were you able to?
Yeah, no. At that point, Barry was the bank. Yeah. And we did local, and it wasn't a 50-50 split. It was, I don't know, he may have paid us. We were grateful to be on the bill, right?
Sweat equity, whatever that gotcha.
Yeah. So we may have been paid a fee. We may have had a percentage. I don't know. But what it did was it gave us a start of a working relationship. And we actually really enjoyed working with each other. And I loved John Ruby and Larry Melnick and all the Jeff Crump, all the people that were around Barry at that time. And we started doing a little bit more together. We did some Diana Ross shows the next year, and she hadn't worked in many years. And then I was starting to do more stuff in Arizona with my partner at the time, Mike Fahn. Mike was a little risk averse, and so he was nervous about some of the things we were trying to do. And new music was just starting out, what they called new wave music then, which was, the Depeche Modes and the Police and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Basically FBI.
Yeah, because some of it seemed really risky. Mike wanted to be on some stuff, but not all the stuff. And so what we wound up working out was separate from San Diego. Everything that Fayline was doing outside of Colorado, I would do with them. And then Colorado obviously was Fayline, and then San Diego was obviously Fahn and Silva. And it worked out really well, and it gave me exposure to agencies and managers that I wasn't being able to get on my own yet. I hadn't been able to make inroads with ATI and Elliot Roberts in the same way. And
right, because you were the next generation of promoters, where Barry Fay was a generation ahead of you already, where he had all those relationships established.
That's right, yeah. Barry was more a peer of Brian Murphy's, if you will. Barry had been in it longer, but Brian was much closer to being established in that era that Barry was with, Frank Barcelona and Barbara setting up the franchise system, if you will, and handing out their franchises.
Right.
And, the interesting story in the early days for me was there was a guy at Premiere who was just starting out who booked colleges named Tim McGrath. And Tim and I became best buddies. He sold me a Pat Benatar show when I was at college, and she was just starting out, and she had to cancel. And I don't remember why she canceled. It was just, what happens. And so the next year I did Pat at this little beat up theater in San Diego that had been out of business for many years. And my partner and I used to have to go take the owner to lunch. Well, we would have to take him a sack lunch once a week because he was an old guy who didn't believe in leaving his plumbing business to leave for lunch. And he owned all this real estate downtown. And after about 6 or 8 months, we walked in one day. He says, I'll tell you what's it going to take for you guys to not come bother me every week? And we said, we just want to use your theater. And he goes, okay, here's the keys. Send me the rent. It's up to you, the rest of it. So we actually went in and scrubbed the floors and cleaned the dressing rooms and put toilet paper in and got cleaning supplies. It was a California theater.
Okay. So it's Escondido, right?
No. It's downtown San Diego. It was about a block away from the Civic Theater, south. So we did Pat Benatar and Devo there. It was Pat's first headline show in San Diego, and then Devo's first headline show in San Diego. And we got the theater going again. And then the following year, Pat was going on tour and had blown up, and every promoter in the world was bidding on her. Like guys I'd never heard of were trying to make bids in San Diego. I was getting word from Tim that he was worried that Frank and Barbara were going to give it to Brian Murphy or Jim Rissmiller, who was around at that time with Wolf and Rissmiller. And so I had never spoken to her, but I called Barbara Skydell. It took a couple times to get the call answered, but when I did, she was very nice. She said, "Hi, Bill. I know who you are. How can I help you?" I said, "Well, Barbara, I've had so much respect for your agency franchise system. Like I see how, you guys really established this loyalty among your promoters and artists where when you invest early on, you stick with them as the artist grows. And I just want you to know that I'm really counting on you to continue doing that because of my relationship with Pat Benatar and blah, blah." And she started, sort of explaining why Jim Rissmiller this or Brian Murphy that or this, that. I said, "Barbara, I get it. I only survive if you stick to your word." So like, I don't know what else to tell you. You've shown extreme loyalty. I'm grateful for the relationship. This is a make or break for me. And I got the date. The funny thing was my friend Tracy Gershon from Santa Barbara was working at Avalon at the time. And about a week before the show, she says, "Hey, Bill, who's settling your Pat Benatar show?" And I said, "What do you mean?" "I am." And she goes, No, but I mean, who's settling? Who's doing all the bills and the invoices and the expenses and stuff?" And I go, "What are you talking about?" I go, "I've got a contract. I paid them this much up front. I pay them this much after the show. And like, we're all done." She goes, No. You really have to do this whole thing. They're going to send somebody in that's going to audit your expenses. And I go, "Are you kidding?" She goes, "No, you don't know how to do it." I said, "No." She goes, "I'll ask Brian if I can come do it." And Brian wouldn't let her go.
Was that the first real receipt settlement?
It was my first arena show. Yeah, it was my first real receipt settlement. So she goes, "Look, I know this guy. He's a really good friend of mine. You may have met him before. I suggest you call him because he really knows this stuff and can probably help you." And I go, "Who?" And she goes, "This guy, Mike McGinley. He's known as the Goon." And I said, "Oh, I know the Goon. I've met him a bunch of times with Bobby Engel and, we've stayed together, whatever." I said, "Okay, great." So I call him. I go, "Hey, Mike, this is what I got going on. Can you come down and help me?" He goes, "Yeah, I'd be happy to. No problem." And so we walk into the settlement room and the tour accountant turns white and looks at me and goes, "Can I talk to you for a sec?" And takes me outside and he goes, "What the fuck is that guy doing here?" And I said, "Well, I've never settled a show before and I didn't want to mess your settlement up. I wanted to get it done right." And he goes, "Oh, he's not here for my job?" And I go, "No, he's here to help me not be an idiot with you." And he goes, okay, good. So we get into settlement.
You brought the accountant Jesus in to settle your show.
So we get into settlement and we're going through and everything is going great. Everybody's speaking the same language and the numbers and I'm getting the hang of it. And all of a sudden we get stuck, like there's a pause. And I go, "What's up, Mike?" And he goes, "Silva, I'm looking at this catering bill. It's out of control. You got to pay for this catering bill. You can't ask the artist to pay for it." And he throws it over his shoulder. And I go, "Hey, who are you working for here, buddy?" So that was my first settlement. We made it through. Pat made a lot of money. We made a lot of money. It was my parents had not been great fans of me being in this business. A, they didn't understand it. B, they thought I was selling drugs or something, which I wasn't. I hadn't finished school. I dropped out of school to start the business. And they just saw no visible means of support. How is this all happening, right? And so that night, I had Count Basie sold out at Symphony Hall, and then Pat Benatar sold out at the Sports Arena. And I'd invited my entire family down. My mom and dad were going to go see Count Basie, and my brothers and sisters, I've got 6 younger brothers and sisters, were all going to come to the Pat Benatar show. And at the last minute, my mom canceled. She was sick or something. And my dad called me back and he goes, do you mind if I go to that Pat Benatar show with the kids? Like, no, come on. So I had my whole family there. It was, quite a memorable start.
That's a nice moment.
Like, it was, yeah.
There's an accepting there. I think everybody's parents may have a little problem with the concept of running away and joining the circus.
No question.
It's a different world. Now, on top of the music, the skating thing seemed to flirt with your world a little bit too when you were down in San Diego, right? Tony Hawk and all that stuff. And before that?
So what happened was I didn't have visibility into it until the late 80s, even though obviously it was always going on. And even though I lived next to the beach, I never became a surfer, although many of my friends were. I had moved to LA to work with Avalon for about 6 or 8 months. And then I had decided it wasn't the right time and place to move back to San Diego. When I moved back to San Diego and started the new business, I got introduced to a young musician who was working at a skateboard company at the time. He was a really bright guy. And he came in and he said, hey, look, there's all these athletes. And I watch what happens with rock stars where they have managers and, people that help them. And we've got all these kids that are basically being taken advantage of. They don't have any sense of business and they're happy to do it for the art. But I think there may be an opportunity to, really make a business out of it.
So protect them at the same time.
Yeah. So I hired him to come to work for me and we signed a bunch of the young top skaters at the time, Chris Miller, Mark Rogowski, Billy Ruff. None of the manufacturers wanted to hear from us, basically. So we became the enemy. And this was before anybody had heard of X Games and all that stuff. So anyway, long story short, we figured that much like artists to go out to promote their music at that time, we would put these guys on the road to go promote their brands and try to sell more skateboards, more shirts, more equipment, whatever was branded for them, just to help increase their royalty flow, but also to increase visibility for the business, for skateboarding, for the sports and stuff. And so we put a tour together that Wayne Forte booked for us.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And Swatch was our sponsor. Swatch was just blowing up at that time. And we had probably 3 or 4 of the top pro skateboarders, the vertical skateboarders. We had a couple of BMX guys, Ron Wilkerson, who's a dear friend of mine and who eventually many years later would introduce me to Jason Mraz. Ron broke his ankle before the first show and we were panicked and he said, don't worry, I've got this kid who's better than me. He'll be able to do it. And that was Matt Hoffman. So Matt Hoffman came in and stole the show at 16 years old every night. And I didn't have to worry about it because his dad had a private plane, was flying him to all the shows. So I didn't have to. I mean, it wound up. The tour was not charmed. We had many problems, including that a hurricane hit as our ramp was traveling through Texas, blew the truck over and destroyed the steel ramp that we'd spent hundreds of thousands of dollars fabricating. So we kind of had to call the tour off at that point, which wasn't the worst thing in the world.
Were you finding an audience for that already at that level?
You know what's interesting? I'll tell you, New Jersey, I want to say John Shear had about 7,000 or 8,000 people, although the show was so expensive, he probably lost money. But Auburn Hills had just opened up and the Balkans were the most successful show on the entire tour. And whatever Jules did to promote that show and in that room, we had 14,000, 15,000 kids sold out to the rafters in Auburn Hills, Michigan.
Wow.
And that was the clear standout on the tour. Everything else other than that was 2,000 to 4,000 or 5,000 seats range.
I mean, you guys were 25 years ahead of the Huck Huck Jam thing.
Yeah. Well, and Tony came and would guest on some of the shows, and Christian Hosoi, I think, came and guested on some of the shows. And I mean, it had a great vibe. And I think at that point, some of the other manufacturers saw it and started going, oh, got it. We see how this could, potentially lead to something else. But for us, it did start leading to an intersection of music and culture. I wasn't managing any artists at that time, but we were using it as a nexus point with lots of artists who were like, oh, hey, I saw you're doing the skateboarding thing. Can you help us get these guys in our videos, or can you introduce us to my favorite skater, or can, whatever. So
kind of early days before Warp kind of came to be, but you could kind of see that there was something there for that.
Yeah. And funny enough, Kevin was involved with us early on. Kevin was a big part of the production that went out on the road.
Stage manager and stuff for that kind of stuff. Yeah. I mean, even early on, the audience didn't get Warped until the second or third year. It took some training of the audience to understand what it was.
No question. Yeah. And X Games, I think, didn't start until 94, 95, something like that. And that was the first time people started getting all this other stuff too, the alternative sports in a big, mainstream way.
San Diego built into your market, and obviously you competed quite a bit with Avalon, but you were doing the arena shows, stadium shows, club shows. You were going into other markets, Phoenix and LA, and you'd pop around the country. You'd come into Denver and help me from time to time. You were one of the first next generation of indies that came up in that territorial system that was actually able to get that play in that arena game. How did that happen? Because it was really competitive at that point where the indies that own those territories, guys like Brian Murphy and, the Jams of this world were able to keep most of the markets locked up. Was San Diego just considered a secondary that you were able to come up in?
I don't know that I'm going to have a satisfying answer, so I'll give you my perspective. San Diego, although Avalon fought fiercely for it and they had a local promoter for many years down there, they were much more concerned about LA. LA was the castle. It was the aircraft carrier, and they did not want anything to affect LA. So I think San Diego, Fresno, Bakersfield, Santa Barbara, those were all more about putting a moat around rather than we need to own everything that happens here. Although they were fierce competitors in San Diego, I don't think they lived or died at the end of the day by whether or not they had it. And then certainly once they opened Irvine Meadows, and that was the gravy train for them, they honestly didn't seem to care much about what happened south of Irvine Meadows.
It seemed to be a little bit of a little bighorn effect for you, though, like from San Diego being able to move into LA.
Well, LA was further down the road because the first steps were concentric circles around LA. Because I think we realized LA was already so competitive, and rather than going straight at the hornet's nest, there was plenty of business and profit to be made and working with these artists and all these other places that actually needed it. And so because San Diego was early on in new wave music at the time, that next generation of artists that was about to come up, we got insight early on and relationships early on with, whether it was NXS, Depeche Mode, Police, Oingo Boingo, Wall of Voodoo, whoever it was, the Thompson Twins. They weren't getting the same level of airplay in Phoenix, El Paso, Tucson, in particular that southwestern region. And so we had like a half a step ahead of even Zalisco for quite a while. Over the years in Phoenix, I did REM, I did the Smiths, I did B-52s, Ramones, Talking Heads, all of Gary Kerfer's acts. Gary was an early supporter of mine who was one of the most genius managers I've ever worked with. And The Clash, because of Gary and Wayne, I met this guy named Stu Weintraub, who had been an agent at William Morris, but who wound up being in the Clash camp. And we wound up doing all these Clash shows all over the country. So that led to, and then that was fun. It was fun to travel. It was fun to get out of the market. It was fun to go meet new faces in other places. And so that led to the excursions. And then really in LA, the first time that I worked up here was in 87. And I don't remember who approached us, but somebody came to us with a Doobie Brothers reunion for a benefit concert at the Hollywood Bowl. It was anybody who had ever been a Doobie Brothers. So it was Michael McDonald, Tommy Johnston, Pat, all the guys. Somehow I wound up parlaying that into a 10-city tour.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because Michael would only agree to do it if everybody would agree to do a show for him in the Bay Area for his charity. And then we put Portland, Seattle, Denver, Phoenix. We put everything else around it, San Diego. Phoenix wound up falling out because Arizona just passed a law where they weren't going to honor Martin Luther King or observe Martin Luther King Day. And the Doobie Brothers became the first artists to say that we're not going to play in Arizona if they're not going to observe Martin Luther King Day. So we got even more publicity for the tour as a result of that. But I mean, it really impressed me, like guys that they didn't have anything to win or lose, but they just kind of spoke their mind and put their money where their mouth was. It was great.
Integrity move.
So anyway, so that was 87. And then a couple of years later, one of the guys that I had met who worked at the Bowl became a much bigger part of my life because his name was Mark Ferber. He's since passed on. But Mark and I really hit it off when we were doing the Doobie Brothers show. A couple of years later, some other people had approached Andy Hewitt and myself about doing the shows. Would we want to do shows at the Bowl? And maybe they'd even give us a contract to do it.
Were you already working with Andy at that point?
Andy and I had worked together. We'd been friends for many years at that point. We'd collaborated on a lot of stuff together. We'd worked together at Avalon for about 3 or 4 months. And then Andy left and then I eventually left. And we just stayed in touch. And I think we were doing some projects here and there, but there was nothing formal at that time.
Got it.
But Andy came and said, hey, what do you think of this idea? I said, great idea. Let's do it. And so I called Mark and said, what are the pitfalls we're going to have? What are the problems? So Mark helped coax us through some of the nuances of the venue that we would have never known about. And we started this long-term relationship with the Philharmonic. Ernest Fleischman was the executive director at the Philharmonic at the time. Probably the most well-versed man in overall music that I've ever met. Like he knew as much about Sting and Linda Ronstadt and Dire Straits and you name any artist in pop. And he could tell you everything about them and their music. And he could tell you everything about every classical piece you've ever wanted and the composer and why this orchestra's interpretation worked and this one didn't. And it's just like a genius guy. He was a delight to work with. But he had a vision, and he came to us from the very first day and laid out, I want to restore the bowl to the glory days. And, we had everybody play here in the day, and it just isn't happening anymore. And I see that you guys are getting all these artists and all these other places. You don't have a place in LA. We want you to make the Hollywood Bowl your home in LA, and let's restore it to its legacy.
It's hard to believe in this day and age that there was ever a moment that the Hollywood Bowl wasn't the Hollywood Bowl, because it is the Hollywood Bowl.
Well, it is, but funny enough, we've become victims of our own success in a way recently too, where the issues we encountered when we started the relationship at the Bowl and when the Philharmonic announced that they were going to do a series with us came primarily from the neighborhood. We heard from the artist community, from the agents and the managers, but particularly the agents who said, place is too expensive, it's unwieldy. There were tons of production issues. We didn't have the stage then that we have today. Then in the early 90s, we had to construct scaffolding to put up sound and lights. It limited the height of things. It meant bands couldn't bring their productions in. There were sound limitations. The catering situation was pretty abysmal backstage, and they weren't very flexible initially. There's a perspective about cost structures in the building, and all that took time to change. And we had to be proactive venue side, the operations side, to get people to buy in and collaborate with us.
And now that's changed, right?
That's changed dramatically. Although there are some new, just with what happens in this day and age and outdoor venues and the care you have to take, public safety and planning for safety, our costs have gone up significantly in the last few years, as has every promoter's.
Right. Safety first.
Yeah, safety first. But separately, the neighborhood felt that they'd been abused for years by the Philharmonic, is the best I can say it. And I don't know that they were or they weren't, but we became sort of the sticking point to hold up our concert series through contacting the local supervisor, county supervisor, getting him involved. Really what they wanted was they wanted to be heard, because there hadn't been anybody from the Philharmonic interacting with the...
So you had to have outreach.
They needed to be heard. They needed solutions to some problems, which there were very simple solutions. We just took basic things we were doing at other venues, suggested they implement it at the Bowl. The Philharmonic embraced it and was happy to do it. And I mean, pretty quickly, most of our problems disappeared within the first few months. The neighbors got that we were bending over backwards, and the Philharmonic was finally paying attention and being responsive. So over the years, I would say there was a really much stronger relationship with the community, ongoing outreach. We're now doing 40 shows a year, 35 to 40 shows a year, as opposed to 4 or 5 shows a year. The Philharmonic is still doing their 72 nights a year. So we're just hearing from the neighbors that they're just getting fatigued. And now we live in an era of Uber. So that street that used to get 50,000 cars a day because of Uber and Lyft and ride sharing is getting 75,000 cars a day anyway. And then you put a Hollywood Bowl show on the night, and now they're getting 90,000 cars. You can't get anywhere. There's gridlock. It takes 2 hours to get to the venue. Like all the complaints.
Similar things that the guys at the Greek are dealing with.
Yeah. Again, we're hearing, because we're doing more shows, there's more nights that are, troublesome for the neighbors. We're back to hearing some of these things. So again, the Philharmonic, with Live Nation's help, or, who are our partners, identified some ways to do a better job at community outreach. It's much more proactive and consistent. It's not reactive to only the problems. Fingers crossed. I think, when you balance a community jewel, a unique jewel like the Hollywood Bowl is unbelievable, beautiful park and cultural amenity in the middle of a very dense city. It doesn't happen very often. It's a pretty rare occurrence. And so we want to balance the welcome mat with being able to accommodate the activity as well. So we want the neighbors to be as happy as we can make them be.
There are a couple of international players that you see that look like they have a bigger presence in the world because they're the only ones that show up at the conferences in America. Michael Chugg from Australia, Harvey Goldsmith in the early days from the UK. When you go internationally to some of those international conferences, you have the same presence at LMC as you do here in the U.S. at conferences. Building that up must have taken a lot of work internationally, and it's something that most of the American promoters don't have relationship. Did that come from the management side, or have you always been a travel guy?
I got the travel bug in '84. I decided I was going to get out of Southern California for the Olympics that summer. And it was the first time I'd traveled out of the States, and I went to Europe for...
Everybody's coming here, you're getting out.
I went to Europe for 3 or 4 weeks, and I had an absolute ball. And I want to do this as much as I can. And in those days, we didn't have summer seasons. We had shows, but they didn't necessarily get troughed into the 3 months of the summer. So it was really easy to take a summer and, or take a few weeks in a summer and head over to Europe. And I did. And so I spent time meeting promoters, festivals. We were dealing with a lot of the agents over there.
So all that predated your management days.
For sure. Yeah, this was back in the 80s. And I really didn't start in management till, the mid-90s, early to mid-90s. And Ian Flukes was one of the agents early on in Europe that we became very friendly with. His assistant at the time was a young woman named Emma Banks, who's gone on to do unbelievable things and who I consistently rate as, the best agent in the world. And no disrespect to any of my other friends. I just, I've worked with Emma so closely with clients and seen how she operates. But the point being that Ian, because of our relationships with Gary Kerr first, and Ian handled most of his acts because of our relationship with Paul McGuinness and U2, and Ian was handling U2 and Simple Minds and all these artists that we were doing over here, we would often see Ian and then we would make a point, Andy being a part of this, because we were both the young guys in Southern California doing these artists at that time. We would both make a point to get over to Europe and hang out with them, go to festivals, go to dinners, show up at tour dates, and just started meeting everybody. And through them, we met the network of European promoters. And then certainly when I got involved in management in the 90s, no question, you got to know everybody. For me, it was, boots on the ground to know who's going to do the job for you.
But your international understanding for the business is something that I don't feel that most U.S. promoters truly get how the rest of the world works. And you've got a different understanding for how the global business works.
I don't know that most U.S. promoters need to have an understanding of it, really. For me, again, I'm inquisitive. I'm curious. I like learning about things. Look, I think the big issue of the next couple of years in the United States is going to be the issue of performance royalties. And all the societies are auguring for much higher rates in the U.S. than they're being paid currently. BMI has sued the concert promoters to get the court to set a higher rate. ASCAP seems to be in contract, but they're pushing for higher rates, as they should be for their writers and publishers. And
I was about to say they're doing their job, but I can't get the words out.
Well, here's the interesting thing. It's challenging to look at a backdrop where you've got most European countries that have a VAT that comes off the top that's somewhere between 11 and 21%. So you've got a tax off the top. In most countries, it's 19 or 20%. On top of that, you're paying a PRO somewhere between 3 to 7% of the gross off the top. In the United States, we pay 0.5% or less than 0.5%. Although I think our 0.5% stacked up against any other territories, 3 to 7% is probably a greater number.
Right.
The publishers and the societies say clearly there's some elasticity in this equation. If you can pay 20% in tax and still afford to be able to pay 3 to 7% in a performance royalty in a different country, and the artist can still make their money. Clearly, that artist can still make their money in the United States. You don't have a 20% tax, and you can get us closer to, and I don't know, none of them can state because of antitrust laws, what their objective is. But I think clearly everybody in the PRO business has their sights on a bigger pot.
The industry's changed over the years, particularly the years that you really started to rise. Promoters had a reputation for being used car salesmen, whereas today, promoters are the bank and they're the gold standard of the business. Nobody's getting shows that anybody's worried about them getting paid. The industry's really changed around promoters and how the business fluctuates and how well the promoters are valued in the deal and how service-oriented they have to be. Promoters used to talk to agents much differently than they do now. But you've seen that rise of how the hospitality and the attitude towards agents has really shifted over time. Like Barry would never talk to agents the way we do now.
How do you talk to agents?
I talk to agents very lovingly. I have to. I couldn't get shows otherwise. I think there was just a different attitude back then, the way that Graham or guys like Delsner might have had the ability to talk to agents as they came up versus in the current day.
Well, look, I think you went from a bunch of extreme entrepreneurs. It was a new territory, and they had to have sharp elbows to make it all work. They had to figure everything out from the ground up, whether it was police, fire, how do you do public assembly, how do you sell tickets, how do you make your money. I know that there's always books about making money on the side and the side deals and this, whatever.
Well, that's a service business, though, and everybody treats it as such.
Right. But I think what you're seeing is through all the different consolidations in agencies and promoters and even some management companies, I think what you're starting to see is just a sense of collaboration in general. I think that there's more of an appreciation for often being able to get more done by collaborating instead of poking people in the eye. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's not the case. Maybe you can still poke people in the eye and get more done. But that seems more like a win-lose situation as opposed to, I think, the evolution has been more towards, can we create a win-win environment?
Well, you want everybody to go away happy so they come back.
That, in addition to, can you create a bigger pot? If you're not fighting over the little stuff, can you be collaborative in a way that creates a bigger pot for everybody? look, that's one of the great respects I've got for Michael Rapino is his very first talk that I remember him giving when he took over, Live Nation in the U.S. was that he didn't want to fight over the insurance rate or the agency commission or not or whatever. He wanted to make the pot 50%, 100% bigger so that everybody had more money and that we weren't fighting over pennies, but we were creating dollars. And I think the guy's unbelievable job of following that through for all the years that he's been, putting Live Nation on the board.
Let's jump over to the management world. How did you wind up in that game? Because you wore two hats and you would be able to do both at the same time in a lot of cases.
I call concert promotion buy low, sell high, do it often. It's a commodities business.
Right.
I call management the brand management business, it's the love and hug business. It's, for me in particular, it's always been a passion business. I call it the goosebumps effect. So I'm not interested in just managing people. I got to get goosebumps from something, either from a song, from a voice, from a performance, hopefully from a performance. And I would tell you that most of the choices I've made in working with artists have been based on their live performance and the fact that I get goosebumps from it. And if I don't get goosebumps, I'm unlikely to want to go any further.
That makes sense. I mean, and I think most people would think management and they'd go to the bigger two bands automatically, but Blink and Unwritten Law were club bands way before you got involved with Jason Mraz.
Right.
And I mean, Blink blew up, but that was really small, but amazing live shows.
Absolutely. Well, look, I'll credit Rick DeVoe on those two because we were doing a local show annually that was to benefit a local homeless kids charity. And there really wasn't a place for the local artists. And we had a huge community of really burgeoning musicians. There really wasn't any forum for them to ever play on a big show, play with production, get big advertising, and get exposed. Look, you can point to South by Southwest or Austin City Limits or any of these other festivals that have come up that have been curated through local art originally. We were really just an extension of that. So we would every year go to all the radio stations. There would be the one day a year that all the stations would quit fighting and support one thing because it was all about the local musicians. And we'd put 2 or 3 stages, 40 artists, one day, full production on all of them, and $10 tickets and fill the park, and whatever was left over went to the homeless kids charity. And what started happening over the years was we'd have Jason Flom and all the A&R guys would be coming down, and we'd have a weekend of like all these A&R guys in San Diego, and suddenly bands were getting signed. This really created a highlight for the scene. But Rick was working with me at the time, and he came to me after one of them and said, hey, do you remember the kids where the guy was climbing up on the scaffolding during the show and the crowd was going nuts? I said, yeah, that was Unwritten Law. He said, those guys want us to manage them. I said, great, as long as I don't have to do anything. And a week later, I was on a plane to New York to meet with a guy named Richard Griffiths who ran Epic Records and wanted to sign Unwritten Law. And a couple of weeks later, he comes in and goes, hey, now these kids from Blink want us to manage them. And Blink eventually became Blink 182. And Rick did an incredible job with them over the years.
Well, I think you're skipping over there is you found a kid that was still in college that wanted to manage punk rock bands, and you gave him a desk. Like, you spotted talent in the manager.
That was an Andy Summers find.
Really?
Yeah, because I was driving by this gay club. It was usually a gay club. I was driving by this club one night, and I saw these guys and girls lined up to get in. And I was like, God, what's going on there? And then asked my young team the next day, and they said, oh, yeah, we heard some band named Pennywise was playing there last night or whatever. I go, Pennywise? So I called Andy, and I said, hey, Andy, you got these guys Pennywise, and they sold out this place last night. He goes, yeah, it was great. I go, who promoted the show? He said, oh, my buddy, Big Dummy. I go, what? He said, Big Dummy, Rick DeVoe. And now that I think about it, you should really know Rick. He's killing it in the scene, and he knows everybody. He's a surfer and all this stuff, and you did the skate stuff, and you guys should know each other, and he could use somebody to help him take his bands bigger. And that's how we met. And so Rick came in and we worked together for a couple of years, and he was promoting all those artists for us. We were doing dates with NoFX and Lagwagon and No Doubt and all his friends and Pennywise, lots of Pennywise shows. Fletcher was big and imposing then too. I loved it. I absolutely loved, meeting the next generation of artists through Rick. And then he was the one who said, hey, let's try this management thing.
I always found it interesting. It was just, you're doing the Horde tour and Eric Clapton, and yet you're taking time to work on a $7 punk rock band that's playing a 500-seater. Amount of time that you're putting into that when you didn't have to at that point. Obviously, there's something else going on there than just an investment.
What I loved about it was I learned so much from both bands, from Unwritten Law and from Blink. But from the Unwritten Law guys in particular, the ethos, they were true punk rock guys. Like, couldn't sell T-shirts over $5 or $10. I don't remember what the price was now, but whatever everybody else was selling them for didn't matter to them. They needed to take care of the fans. The tickets couldn't be over this price. The T-shirts wouldn't be over this price. The kids had to be treated this way. They would only play all ages venues. And I'd ask the questions. I'd dig in and go, why? Why is that the ethos? Why does this matter? And they would share it with me. And all those lessons were fan-facing. It was all about taking care of our fans from the artist perspective. And I always felt that, and Blink, of course, had their own ethos and lessons they taught us too. One of the most noticeable being hard work. Those guys are the hardest working guys I've ever seen. They'd come in and go, here's the next album, here's the artwork, we're ready to go. And then we got songs going already. And what? They were just always on top of it. But both of them really cared about their fans from day one and really paid extra attention that as a promoter, of course we value our fans, but it was a different level of care and attention and value to the message you're sending to the fans. And so I would tell you that translated in how we treated back as promoters. I think that we grew as a promoter. We had more sensitivity to the artist side of the equation. We had more sensitivity to why the writer actually mattered to them sometimes when we thought they were crazy writers. And I would tell you that I was able to apply many of those lessons with Jason Mraz, with Linkin Park, with, many of the other artist clients that we took on over the years in management, because it was just all about how do you treat your fans great.
Now, Jason came along later, but the one thing I really always found interesting about Mraz, as well as Blink and Unwritten Law, although I was doing club bands at that time, so when Blink and Unwritten Law were selling 500 tickets and I was promoting them, I never thought they'd get any bigger, because the idea of punk bands playing 3,000 seaters just wasn't happening at that point. Besides maybe the Ramones, nobody was doing that yet. So I didn't really see that. When you got involved with Jason Mraz and you called and said, check this out, it's okay, what is this? Come to the show. You're going to love it. And I remember Portland, you with walking pneumonia in the back of a club, watching Mraz, which we were sure was going to play to 100 people. And you broke a single between the time we put a club show on sale and it came, which I think had even surprised you how quickly that had broken, because we probably would have gone bigger. But from the first play, you knew what was going on with that. You saw something with Jason Early's, just like Blink and Unwritten Law, who had also gotten much bigger than I ever thought they would.
With Jason, I'll tell you, the funny story is, so Ron Wilkerson, who was one of the pro athletes on the Swatch Tour in 88, remained a close friend of mine. In 99, he was dating a woman who had just moved out from Virginia, and her ex-boyfriend had just showed up and was sleeping on the couch. And her ex-boyfriend happened to be Jason. And he kept telling me, you've got to meet this kid. He's unbelievable. And so I had a weekend in Vegas at the Hard Rock. We were doing shows with Alanis Morissette one night, and she was hot as could be. And we were doing...
This is when you were booking the joint?
Yeah. And we had Billy Joel the next night. So Marty and Marilyn Diamond were out there. Ron comes in. He's got this scrawny kid with a guitar in his hands. Comes in the hotel, says, hey, here's my buddy I wanted you to meet. You got to meet him. Blah, blah. Okay, great. And so we hang out for whatever. And later on, we're back in the room before the show. Scrawny little kid Jason says, well, do you want to hear some music? And I'm like, oh, shit, I'm going to have to listen to some music. Okay. So he breaks out his guitar. I've never had this experience the same way since, but the very first time he strummed the guitar and opened his mouth on the first lyric, I got goosebumps and I got a download of the entire trip that we wound up being on for the next 20 years. I saw the stadiums. I saw the arenas. I saw the big singles.
You had the vision for
I saw the big bands. It all just downloaded in that second. And I went, whoa. So he finished the song. I said, hang on one second. I called Marty. I go, Marty, get down here. You've got to come check this out. And so Marty and Marilyn came down, and Jason keeps playing. And Marty's in tears and mouth open. And he goes, well, obviously you're managing him. Well, can I be the agent? And I said, okay, you're the agent. And that was the start. And Jason's still with Marty and Paradigm to this day. And I'll tell you, the hard work thing came in again with him. We were in the lucky position. I never needed the money from the management side of the business to make my living. I did great.
Your concert division was very well established at that point.
We were doing great. So Jason moved into my house from San Diego that I just moved out of because I had moved to LA, and he stayed there with some roommates and built his business. He started writing, and we gave him an allowance to write for a couple of years, and we put him into Java Joe's, introduced him to Joe and all the local musicians down there, the Steve Poltz's, Gregory Page's, the scene that Jewel came out of. Everybody fell in love with him. Everybody immediately saw the talent and potential and really got behind him. One day he sent us a couple of demos he had cut with a friend, and we realized there was a single in there, and, a little bit of a bidding war later, and Elektra Records, which was on the verge of being the coldest record company in history at that point, wanted to sign him. And I just had this feeling that the place that had been the home to Jackson Browne and Tracy Chapman and the Eagles, somewhere in its DNA, would find the ability to make this guy a star. And it was, look, in hindsight, it was the right decision.
How much of Jason breaking had to do with him not being unattractive by any means, and the fact that he's so charming on stage? His banter on stage is so fun and playful.
He is relentless in getting a reaction from an audience. And so I watched him early on at Java Joe's and these places where there'd be,
Did he have that early on?
He had it early on.
I mean, I get that it has to develop, but
just before we were doing the first tour around the first album release, he was disappearing every Wednesday night, and I couldn't find him. And finally, after a couple of weeks, I go, where the hell are you going every Wednesday night? Like, we need to be doing these other things. And he said, oh, I've been going to the Improv. I go, what? He goes, it's open mic night. I go do 10 minutes at the Improv. I go, why? You're not a comedian. He goes, dude, I got to get a feel for the banter. I got to feel like what it's like when it bombs and why did it bomb? And I got to know when it's good and how to make it. He goes,
genius.
I got to know how do I move people? Well, look, many years later, he took yoga teacher training for the same reason. He wanted to know how to be up in front of the audience and move energy in a different way. And he's always been a master of his craft. I always thought he was a great guitar player. And one year he decided he wasn't good enough. And I never saw him during that year without a guitar in his hand. Didn't matter what time of day or night. He would just practice. He always was playing with a guitar. And his guitar playing went to a different level. But that's how he is with everything. He's pitch perfect. He gets furious with himself if he feels like he's missed something or flubbed something. He cares about the audience getting the most perfect experience they can get. And he's the most kind-hearted and loving man and bright. Like, this is not a dummy. This is a very bright man. He deserves every bit of the success he's seen. He's worked hard for it.
You developed him from a club into an arena and stadium acts in some parts of the world. Your history was managing club and theater acts. When you went to that next level of managing these acts that were on that level that you dealt with as a promoter, did you already know how to do all of those little things, or did you have mentors that were helping you at that point?
No.
You learned by doing?
Yeah, you learn by doing. I've got a lot of people that I'm able to reach out to and ask. There's a lot of managers I respect. I would call Bill Leopold and go, hey, Bill, here's this thing I'm dealing with. How would you deal with it? He had Maroon 5 breaking at the time, right? And of course, he'd had Melissa have her big years at that point. John Silva, and say, how do you guys deal with this? Or Ron Stone or somebody. And people were happy to share and collaborate. A lot of it was making mistakes and learning from it. Jason said my greatest quality was that I was always so unreasonable.
When you were having that amazing success with Jason, and he had peaks and valleys, so this happened a couple times.
Right.
Balancing a hit act on top of running a very big promotion company and booking the bowl. How were you balancing both sides of the business?
I don't know. I was out of my mind. I was. I had a BlackBerry. I had two BlackBerries. I was on a zillion time zones. At that point, the international travel really started helping. Not that it hadn't before, but remember that this is pre-internet. This is certainly pre-artificial intelligence. And so the intelligence that was happening was, if you travel around the world and you see different cultural things going on, you're able to make connections before other people do, and maybe in a more powerful way. So whether it's connecting Jason with some artists in a different territory or getting those artists to come with him in the U.S., James Blunt early on was blowing up in the UK and the rest of the world, but he hadn't hit over here yet. It was easy for us to take him on tour with us and then go back out on tour with him in other places where we weren't as strong. And it gave him a great foothold and radio hold in the U.S. on his first tour. So many examples of that. Ben Howard, who I absolutely adore, saw him at a festival opening for Jason in the coast of England, a surf festival. So we had so many of those, just serendipitous moments along the way that we were able to parlay relationships and friends into other opportunities.
Now, how did the Linkin Park relationship come along?
It's a funny one. So Sia became a friend over the years, and she came to me with a young female artist named Brooke Candy. And Brooke had just done a video with Grimes that was really very provocative and was getting a lot of
it's a fun video.
Was getting a lot of online support. And she and Sia had connected, and Sia felt that she could really do something with Brooke, and brought her to me and said, look, I think this girl's really special. I want somebody who's got your sensitivity to work with her if it's possible. Would you be interested? And I looked at the videos and I looked at everything. I went, oh my God, this isn't what we do. And I sent it to the rest of my staff. And the answer I got back from everybody was, this is not what we do. And I went, that's bullshit. I never say no because we can't do something. I always want to know why we can't. And so we're going to dig in and make this thing fucking work. So we took on Brooke. David Landy became Brooke's lawyer. we had a lot of twists and turns in the relationship with Brooke, and, her vision changed and the label's vision for her changed. And we eventually wound up parting ways. And I'm actually really happy to see her being out and creative again. But that, that happens in management where things, despite everybody's best efforts and intentions, it just doesn't go in the direction everybody hoped. And at some point you just have to say, you need a different set of eyes and hands here. So anyway, so we had just parted with Brooke, and it had been a difficult project, but I think David must have appreciated how it was handled along the way. And he called me December of 2014, beginning of December, and said, I have a client who's wanting to transition from a traditional management situation into a self-management situation. They've asked me to ask you to consider consulting them for 90 days in the transition, just looking at best practices, find candidates that you would interview and hire to be the full-time in-house permanent manager thereafter. Just so you know, by virtue of agreeing to do the consulting job, you would be ineligible to be the long-term solution. Thank you very much. I'm honored. I have no interest in doing anything. I've had a rough year. I'm exhausted. I'm going to Hawaii. I'm checking out for Christmas. He kept trying to walk me through and convince me how great it was going to be and what he thought it might pay per month. And I said, look, I'm not interested. I'm really no interest. And then he says, and it's Lincoln Park. And I said, I love those guys. I just don't have the energy to pick it up right now. I really need some time off. So he calls me back the next day and he says, will you do me a favor? And I go, what? He said, I'm going to look like a schmuck if I don't produce you. Will you at least agree to come in and take the meeting with the band? I said, sure, no problem. Happy to do that for you. And I walk in, and these guys, it was almost like with Jason, except it was just a meeting at a conference table in an attorney's office. But what they conveyed in terms of, there was no, we're mad at our other managers, fuck them, none of that. It was, we are so grateful for where we are in our lives. We wouldn't be here without those guys. Here's our vision for the future and why we want to do it this way. Here's the organizational chart that we've created that we want to share with you to show you and see what you think about it.
This is the band themselves?
This is the band themselves. It was the most...
Wow.
And then the creative vision, and then the business vision, and then the ancillary places they wanted to go and the things they wanted to do. I couldn't say no. I was just so fascinated. And suddenly my exhaustion lifted and I went, okay, I'd be happy to, And look, fortunately for me, we wound up having just a fantastic rapport over those next 90 days, which became 120 days. And then at that point, they came back and said, would you consider working with us longer term?
The one thing that absolutely was not an option.
Yeah, we'd like to work something out with you. We really like this relationship. And, we feel like we've locked in a really positive, supportive way. So the funniest part of that one is, I'd probably put on a couple of Lincoln Park shows at that point, and I had not been at any of the shows we had put on. I'd seen them once at a House of Blues charity event where they did a song or two with a stripped down set, which, was talking to 20 people at the time. So I had never seen these guys play. So I had violated my first rule of the Goosebumps, although the Goosebumps was in the conversation. So the first, maybe 4 weeks after I start, I go to Tampa or Orlando, meet Dennis Arfit there, to see the band play the first show of this tour that they were doing in the U.S. in 2015. And from the first song, I was like, oh my God, I had no idea. And about the fourth song, I turned around to Dennis and said, Dennis, this is the best band I've ever seen live. These guys are on par with U2 in their best days. Why didn't you tell me? and I got to say, right to the end with Chester, I can tell you 10 shows I saw where Chester was some combination of Baryshnikov meets the best singer in the world meets Pavarotti vocally meets he was just unbelievable. And then the heartbeat of that band around him and Mike's genius. And it's been such an honor to get to do this whole project with them that we've done. And it's clearly unfolded in ways that we didn't expect. And, there's a lot of healing that's had to happen in the last couple of years in the wake of Chester's passing. And that is happening. And the guys they're strong. They definitely will have a future. I can't tell you today what that looks like yet, but yeah.
You got involved with something that I always really kind of loved. I remember being in your office the day that the deal got closed. The Up in Smokes tour was such a genius idea, but seemed so crazy because hip hop didn't tour like rock bands. So to put all of those acts together, put them on the road and actually see it play out and be as successful, it was just not only at the box office, but to see acts showing up and playing shows on time.
Well, Dre's another one of those musical geniuses I've been lucky to work with. He is a perfectionist. He demanded that of everybody around him. It came to us from Peter Paterno, who was the attorney, and Peter was Dre's attorney. And I had just moved up to L.A. We had reconnected. We had known each other for years, but we hadn't spent much time. And Peter and I had reconnected. And it was funny because he had called me, and I knew that I had put in a bid, I think, with John Shear, and there was a radio group out of Arizona. And the three of us had put in one bid together. Magic Johnson had put in a bid, and Al Heyman had put in a bid. And Peter called me and said, hey, I hate to tell you this, but Dre didn't love the conversation with one of your partners, and so Al Heyman's going to get the tour. And I said, give me a second. And I called Magic's guy and said, can we get you in on the bid with us? Because Al's about to get this. And they said, how would it work? And we talked it through. And he said, let me get Magic on the phone. So Magic gets on. He says, okay, Bill, what do you like? Well, okay, got it. All right. So what do we have to do? And I go, I'm going to need you for a meeting. And he goes, no problem. Tell me when and where. So I called Peter back and said, do me one favor. He goes, just one. What is it? I said, hold off the decision and set up a meeting with Dre and me and Magic and John Shear's guy. He said, you're going to get Magic? I go, yeah. He goes, if you can produce Magic, I'll produce Dre. No problem. So we get out to the studio. Magic comes, and in the first 10 seconds why this guy was the leader of championship teams. My man, within 10 seconds, we were basically on our feet doing standing ovations. The tour was sold out. We were playing stadiums. We were doing businesses together. Irvin is an unbelievably charismatic entrepreneur, and there was no way that deal wasn't going down in that room. And that's how we got it. And so, you happened to be at the office when Peter called back to say, that was the right thing. You got the deal.
Well, and it probably was a good move on his behalf, too, because he wasn't really a concert promoter. So to have the back end of you guys producing the shows as a partner probably worked out really well for Magic's team.
Worked great for all of us.
It's a great marriage.
Yeah, it really was. And remember that the backdrop to that tour was that there was I don't remember the name of the label, but there was a tour that was out on the road that had just had a shooting in Boston where somebody had died backstage. And so from the outset, everything was all about hiring the best security team, doing advances, working with police, working with off-duty police on our tour. Dre was really heavy-handed in saying, my people have to be protected. Nothing could go wrong at these shows. This is my brand, my legacy. We have to make sure everything goes perfectly. And it did. We didn't have one incident the entire tour. There was something that happened on the second or third show that I almost thought Dre maybe had staged because it was a relative of his. But there was some young guy, and every night, Dre would take off his belt and do everything. We had metal detectors backstage. Nobody got in backstage without getting searched. Everybody. And if you went out, you got searched again on the way back. Dre came through. A couple other guys came through. Everybody's good. One of whoever this young thug is comes in. The alarm goes off. They pat him down. And I can't remember if he had a gun or a knife or something, right? But he's got something on him. Boom, off the tour. And we never had another problem again with anybody the entire rest of the tour.
The moment of that tour, too, nobody had ever been able to pull that off with hip-hop, like a real tour that worked like a rock tour.
Yeah.
Dre being in the center of that made that work?
Dre being in the center, I think Peter's guidance, Rosenberg with Eminem, there was a lot of influence from rock all around it. Peter brought in Doug Goldstein to consult for Dre and the tour, and Doug, of course, was managing Guns N' Roses, who were on hiatus at that point. And so there was a lot of the rock sensibilities brought to it all. There was a young production manager that Dre hired who's gone on to be just a star in the business and does all the biggest tours. And, we saw that genius showing up early on then, a guy named Curtis Battles. So Curtis was cutting his teeth, but making his chops too at that time. As a promoter and now being a tour promoter, the value of that collaboration between the team on the road and the team around it is just invaluable. If you're going to be fighting every night, it's not going to put the same product on stage. The fans aren't going to get the same thing, and your financial results are going to be iffy.
Well, your entrepreneurial spirit between having a publishing company, having a modeling agency, being a tour promoter, being a regional promoter here in California, on top of management, you're all over the place. What aren't you doing and what's next?
Well, one of the things that I've been paying attention to in the last year and a half, because I think that, we have seasons in life, and I'm certainly not 25 years old anymore, and I'm certainly not 40 years old coming to take on LA. But the thing I've been trying to do in the last couple of years, particularly having seen the repeated effect of the stresses and mental health issues in the business, which are prevalent in life anyway, but I think we get more pronounced in the music business. It really caused me to just take a step back and take time to take better care of myself, make sure people around me are taking better care of themselves, paying attention. You know, if there are warning signs in some of the relationships I have with friends or family or clients or whatever, you know, trying to get in front of it or put professional support around it. I'm really happy to see Live Nation and AEG and everybody saying that they're supporting it, and I believe that they are. I think you're going to see more and more help. But that's the reason I was involved with Music Cares for all the years that I have been and still contribute to them, because the health of our creative community is not just physical health, it's emotional health, you know, it's spiritual health, and our demons are pronounced, you know. And so whether it's Chester, Chris Cornell, or you name it, somehow stresses have been allowed to stack up and become overwhelming. And particularly, I feel an obligation to do more if I'm capable of doing more.
The spirit of that's pretty awesome. Do you have any parting wisdom for some of the young guys coming up behind you in the business?
Work your butt off. I would tell you that my entire career has been right time, right place. I'm the luckiest bastard there is. I work hard. So it's easier to be in the right place when you work hard and travel a lot. But I think right time, right place, treating people well. Like, to me, the first conversation, even if it's a negotiation for something, to me is always just the first of many. Like, I look at everything as a relationship, not as a transaction. And so even though I may not get what I thought I wanted in this first conversation or first dealing with you, what I'm hoping is that we've laid the foundation for a successful long-term relationship, and that there's plenty more ahead to be done. And that's proven to be true most of the time.
Do you have a favorite moment from your career that stands out to you when you like to think back on what you've accomplished so far?
That's sweet. So many, but I'll tell you the one great one. Carlos Santana asked me to take him back into Mexico, and he hadn't been in Tijuana since he left as a 17-year-old. And he was probably in his 40s at that point, because it was like 93, 94. We had started doing shows at a club in just the other side of the border called Iguanas.
That's Tijuana, right?
Yep, in Tijuana. And it was owned by Jorge Hank Roan, whose family and he owned the horse racing track, dog racing track. They owned some betting stuff. And they had built this shopping mall that had this venue in it that we did Bad Religion, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden. Everybody played there in the day, Red Hot Chili Peppers. And so Carlos came up to me at a show in San Diego and said, "Hey, I hear you doing shows in Tijuana, and I've been waiting for God to give me the green light. I really want to go back, and I think this might be the green light." And I said, "Wow, I'd be honored. You know, when do you want to do it?" And he said, "Well, I'll have my people call you, but I think this really might be the right thing." Okay, great. I didn't think anything of it. And I went to, I was about to leave on a vacation to Tahiti with a bunch of friends. We'd booked a boat. We'd done this whole thing. And I get a call from his manager, says, "Hey, Carlos wants to take you up on that offer to do Tijuana. And here's the date 6 weeks from now." And I'm like, "Well, what?" And so,
Arrow, what time?
This is 93, 94.
Okay,
yeah.
got it.
And so I'm scrambling. Fortunately, I had met somebody who was a minister of culture in Baja, California. I found his card in my desk, and I called him and said, "Help. Like, what am I going to do?" And
this isn't a club show.
Yeah. And he said, "Well, you know, this friend of mine, well, not really a friend, but I know this guy who owns this bull ring. They call it the Playa del Toro, which is the bull ring by the sea in Tijuana. It's a beautiful bull ring. It's probably the right place. Here's his number in Mexico City." So I start calling his number in Mexico City. And when I finally get the guy on the phone, I speak enough Spanish for him to understand who I am and that I'm, you know, saying hello.
That's about it.
And he speaks zero English. Like, I can barely get his name. So I run next door to the restaurant, get the busboy to come over and try to translate for us on speaker. And what I realized was, this kid doesn't understand anything about business, so he's useless. So at the end of the phone call, what I understand with this man is I've made a deal with him that I have the use of the bull ring for this week. Like, we understood what the week was, that I was going to send him a wire transfer for $25,000. He was going to fax me the information to send him $25,000, and that the rent for the venue was going to include the toilet paper, and that I also had to hire the union concessionaires to sell the beer. That's as much as I understood and as much as he understood. So I went, "We're going to get screwed. I know I don't know anything about doing this kind of show." I called my partners down there and said, "I need your help. Give me cover. We'll try." But the problem was, they were great with the national government and the border and immigration, but the local government was a different party, and they were not in good favor with them. They said, "We can't help you locally. We'll help you with all the other stuff we do, but we can't help you locally." Oh, shit. So I call a quick press conference, and I invite the mayor, the governor, the head of tourism. I invite everybody so that they know what's coming. And I have Carlos come down, and all the press are there, and none of the officials are there. And so we put the show on sale, sell tickets on Ticketmaster. We call it Regresa a Casa, coming home. Carlos was maybe selling 4,000 tickets in San Diego on that day. We blew through 18,000 tickets on both sides of the border, Mexico and LA. We put the tickets up. I'm now in Tahiti. I have no phone service. There's no cell phones. There's no way to get a hold of anything. I come off the boat and they go, first show sold out. We want to add a second show. I said, great. They said, there's only one problem. I said, what? Well, the government's been running ads in Mexico saying, beware of spending your hard-earned money on this falsely advertised Santana concert because we have not permitted it and we've not approved it. I'm like, okay, got it. So we go down to the city hall and say, what do we have to do? And they say, well, you have to follow our regulations for hiring police, and you haven't done that yet. And I say, oh, no problem. What's the regulation? Well, how many people will you have? Tell them. And go, okay, well, according to our regulations, you have to hire 5,682 policemen. 5,682 policemen. I go, do you have that many policemen? They said, no, but you have to hire them. And I go, oh, got it. So anyway, there's all sorts of funny stories about the raft and corruption and everything else between then and there. The show, it's pouring the week we load the show in Tijuana, pouring. And my stagehands are calling me vomiting because the blood's coming up from the dirt, from the bullfights, and they got to lay plywood down to get the stage. And they're like, the blood's seeping out. So it's pouring. We get to the show. It's still raining. Carlos's dad had been a mariachi. He got his band back together. They opened the show.
Oh, fun.
Pato Bonton went on next. Still raining. Carlos is about to go on. We have a nice moment backstage as he's walking on stage. He walks on stage. The clouds part. He hits the first note. Unbelievable show. He hits the last note. We released balloons and it starts pouring. And the same thing happened the next night too. And
Carlos said, was there, yeah.
Carlos said, God loves me and rock and roll. You know, what can I say?
That's awesome. Apparently doesn't love the stagehands. I had to work the shows. Wow, that was incredible. So after all of the cops you had to hire and everything else, did you actually make $1 on that show?
No, nobody made any money. Poor Carlos, you know. And the intention was to raise the money for the children's charity down there. That was the mayor's wife's charity. And
so all the corruption took all the money and there was nothing for the charity?
Yeah, I mean, whatever, $10,000. There was a little bit left at the end, but not much.
The whole concept.
Yeah, but it was incredible.
That's amazing. So who are some of the guys that mentored you along the way that made it so you could get to be who you are now?
You know, I don't know if mentoring is the right word, but the early relationships that really were supportive were like John Huey. John was my college agent at Paragon, which became FBI. Elliot Roberts, Tony Dimitriades, Jeff Kramer at Lookout Management. I did one of the only Joni Mitchell shows in the 80s that she did because she just didn't tour and just consistently had my back early on. Mark Rothbaum, who's still a dear friend and still managing Willie Nelson all these years later. You know, we did most of Willie's touring with Barry west of the Mississippi for many years. Another guy was just such an honor to work with, and Mark was great. Gary Kerfurst, who I mentioned separately, Paul McGinnis. We just, you know, it was a great time for working with people who you really got to establish longer-term relationships with, and those were the guys.
You really never seem to fear leaving your territory and going into other markets. Without the internet, that learning how to market in a different city had to be a little bit of a challenge. Like, you can't just look up what the weekly is. Like, there's some work involved.
We lost a lot of money along the way. We learned lessons. But, you know, the thing is, each one became a learning opportunity. And so I would spend more time in the market and really get to put a network together in each of them. So it was just replicating it. How have you done it in yours? Because you certainly built that out. And I get it that you've got the internet to work with, but you still need relationships with people.
Sure. I mean, it's obviously all about the act and building out those relationships. But yeah, it's a different day, I would think. And obviously, guys like Beaver have been doing that for a long time, where it's about the act. It's not about the market.
Right.
But it's always impressive to me to look back. And I know the arenas and the theaters can help with marketing sometimes, but sometimes they can't. You got to learn how to market a market on the fly. And to do that in the 90s when maybe there weren't those resources yet, and figuring out what the right station is, because the radio station will always tell you the right station because they want the buy. It's
right.
Like,
well, I'll tell you mentioned Beaver, and I'll tell you that Don and Barry Leff were so impressive in that regard. You know, part of it was that they really had, particularly with Bruce Allen and you know, their other managers that they were tight with, they really had the buy-in on the marketing concept from the outset. So if you know anything about Bruce is a marketing driven guy. Everything's about like, how do I make my artist bigger and how do we have more people know we were there and that kind of thing. So I won't say that it was easy, but the buy-in already existed, where you and I, and when we're bidding a show as a one-off, might be competing and we're like, oh, well, we can lower advertising from 10,000 to 9,000 or whatever, right? Because we need more money for the guarantee. Right. That wasn't part of that discussion. That tour was, we're going after this kind of buy. We're going to do this kind of radio. We're going to do this kind of TV, this kind of print. These are the impressions. These are the billboards. This is how many gross rating points. It was just a whole different look at how they were doing the marketing on the tour from that overview. And man, I was always fascinated by how well they did. And if you look at Beaver Tours, they didn't leave a lot of unsold tickets either at the end of the day.
No, whatever it was, Black Crows, or it worked into something bigger that Bruce was doing in the arenas with a Bublé or even a Bryan Adams. Those guys seem to go after it. I would think with all the success that you had in some of the touring stuff with Up in Smokes and even Kylie, that there would have been more of that. But it seems like...
Yeah, I mean, we co-promoted Margaret Cho stuff. We did, but really... I was more interested in the management stuff at that time, and also with the emergence of Live Nation, with the emergence of, some of the other consolidated, it was Clear Channel, SFX and Clear Channel at the time, but, the stakes changed. The risk reward ratio changed pretty dramatically. And so even if you got a tour, we did 2 tours with Kylie Minogue, 2009 and 2011, which were limited runs. They were like, 8 or 10 shows or so. A lot of work, not a lot of profit at the end of it. Even if you hit it out of the park, on an 85-15 or a 90-10 deal.
How much is there at the end of the day?
And so we had a lot of honor and enjoyment certainly along the way. And it was great to bring an artist to those audiences that might not have otherwise come. But just if we hadn't had the relationship with Kylie that we had, we might not have been willing to take the risk. But that was the evaluation on any other tour these days as well. These guys can afford to pay this much, and they've got a built-in infrastructure. I now have to go replicate infrastructure market to market somehow, whether it's co-promoting or hiring staff full-time to go run around the country. I'm going to have some more fixed cost. I'm going to have a higher risk. Where's the reward at the end of the day? Blah, blah, blah. So we're playing different games, I think, generally when it comes to the arena and stadium shows.
You still doing any of that stuff? Obviously, Live Nation's doing most of those tours, but are you still going after any of that stuff?
No, right now I'm pretty dialed back. The Hollywood Bowl's the only place I've promoted shows this year. I take an occasional artist call that wants to do something special, and we'll help them out or whatever. But it's not to say that I won't do more, but right now I'm pretty happy with the pace.
Until Santana calls and asks you to do another show.
Well, until Lincoln's ready to ramp it up.
Normally on the podcast, we wouldn't get personal, but I think your story in particular lends itself to going a little bit deeper. And I know you pretty well, so I feel like you'd probably be okay with this. Your sexuality and your experiences coming out in the industry and working in the 70s and 80s and 90s when it wasn't maybe so accepted, your experiences there, was that a struggle?
I think maybe my perception at the time, because I was still just coming out and there was not a lot of gay support and content at the time, if you will. Will and Grace had never aired. Maybe Elton John had come out. Harvey Milk and all of that was 76. So this was the very beginning of that. Stonewall had happened. It was new. But no, what I would tell you is my experience in the music business, even back in that time, was that there really was no judgment placed on lifestyle as much as effectiveness. Like nobody kind of seemed to give a shit. As long as you would pay the bills, produce the show well, the audience was happy, the artist sold out, like all the things that we're expected to do as a promoter. And then later as a manager, same thing. Like, can you be a great manager? I will say that the experience of coming out for young people is anything that makes us feel different. And by the way, we all feel different. We're unique human beings. Of course, we all feel different. But I think when we paint ourselves with a brush, whether it's color, sexual identity, gender identity, that makes us feel different growing up from our family and our social group and our peers, then we can oftentimes go in the world having the perception that we're different. And the reality is, we're all a little uniquely different, but we're not that different. We're the same species,
Did you feel at certain points coming up in the industry or even recently that you've ever been discriminated against?
There was a slight time in the 80s with one agent that, that I eventually just called him out on it. And he, I think, maybe was even unaware. Maybe it was a subconscious thing for him because we never had an issue after that. But no, other than that, I would say I don't have a distinct recollection of anybody saying, you're gay, I don't appreciate that lifestyle, I'm not going to work with you. And I certainly had, I don't want to call people out by name, but I certainly had people ahead of me in the business who were openly out and very significant players in the business, managers and agents. And certainly, in my peer group and after, we've had a lot of, LGBT people that have come into the business, and I've been blessed to get some of them across my front doorstep to mentor. One guy who I think is probably one of the best talent buyers and music people I've ever worked with. You know, was a young gay man who I met when he was in college and just loved the business. And maybe being able to work for me and work for our company, there was a wider berth of allowance.
Acceptance
for sure. And support that maybe he wouldn't have gotten as early in other situations. But what I would say was, you know, this kid was so talented that even if it hadn't been with us and it would have taken longer, there's no question in my mind that he would have, you know, been a breakout success in the business because he was a monster for the skills you needed to be a great promoter.
Do you feel that's a different time in the industry, that it's more accepted than it had been as you were coming up in the early days?
Yeah, I think in general in society it's more accepted. And I think it surprised me a couple of years ago. I had a young manager who was making his first trip to the U.S. and we were having dinner to talk about his client and what his plans were. And I must have said something about being gay at dinner because about a couple minutes later he said, "Are there a lot of gay people in the music industry?" I said, "Oh my God, yeah, particularly in LA and the Sound." He said, "Oh, well, where I'm from, there just aren't any people. So I didn't have anybody to relate to and blah, blah." You know, and so it's nice to be able to be a bridge in that regard. But I don't think his experience was that he had been discriminated against. I think it was just he was uncertain about how it would play in a new territory.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, man. Thanks, Dan.
You can just feel the respect between Dan and Bill. What an amazing treat to be a fly on the wall for their chat right here on Promoter 101.
Hi, this is Phil Baldry from Live Nation in the UK, and I'm on Promoter 101.
If you haven't had a chance yet to help Music Cares and pick up a Promoter 101 t-shirt or hoodie, this is your opportunity. Go to promoter101.net/merch. Donate $20 for the t-shirt, $50 for the hoodie. They're super stylish, many, many different options to choose from. Shipping and handling is included. It's all tax deductible. Can't get any better than that. And it goes to a great cause, Luke.
Music Cares is a phenomenal cause, Dan. Not just a great cause, doing amazing work, not only for artists, but the people that work in the industry that keep things moving, from managers to agents to promoters to crew. All across the board, they help out and make a real difference in a lot of people's lives. And I encourage you all to check out more about Music Cares. And we're excited today, Dan, because our friends at Prism are matching the first $10,000 in donations to Music Cares. So get in on this now. That's right. The folks at Prism, a wonderful technology platform for bookers and venues around the world, is giving us a $10,000 matching donation. So if you buy a t-shirt for $20, that's a $40 donation to Music Cares, courtesy of Prism. And if you haven't checked it out, it's a phenomenal platform. Those folks are so incredibly generous. Check out promoter101.net, get a t-shirt, and help out Music Cares.
All those guys at Prism are amazing. Matt Ford, Steve, great people. Love what they're doing. Hey, if you want to drop us a note, hit us at Steiny at promoter101.net. Feel free to tell us what's on your mind.
We're going to be back on Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, 7 p.m. Central, and 8 p.m. on the Eastern Seaboard. Monday's going to be the 200th episode of Promoter 101, and we are going to feature an interview from our very own Dan Steinberg, sitting down in the hot seat. This time he's answering some questions from Andrea Johnson in his full sit-down interview.
Until then, we're wishing you sold-out shows for the weeks to come. Cheers.
Call your mother.
Hi there. My name is Gary Spivak. I am the Executive VP, Head of Talent at Danny Wimmer Presents DWP, and you are listening to Promoter 101.